Hello, and welcome to Movies We Dig, the podcast about film, antiquity, and everything in between. I'm Christy Vogler.
I'm Elijah Fleming.
And I'm Colin McCormick.
And today on the episode, we are covering a brand new series set in ancient Rome, which will also be the final TV show we discuss for Season 4. That's right, we're gearing up for Season 5, which we're all pretty excited for, especially Lige and I. But before we get to Season 5, we have to talk about Those About to Die, an epic historical drama television series developed by Robert Rodat and directed by Roland Emmerich and Marco Cruz-Painter. Cruz-Painter. There we go. The show is adapted from Daniel Mannix's book of the same title and chronicles the world of the Roman Empire's games centered around charioteers, gladiators, and politics surrounding the Emperor Vespasian, played by Sir Anthony Hopkins, and his two sons, Titus and Domitian. To help us out, we have the lovely Alexandra Sills, a recent graduate of the University of Leicester, former Working Classicist of the Year, contributor to Bad Ancient, and last but not least, our resident Roman gladiator specialist. As you all probably know by now, Alexandra has a particular research interest in Roman spectacle and entertainment, which is perfect for today's discussion of this latest TV series. Welcome back to the podcast, Alexandra.
Hello, I am delighted to be back. So excited about this one.
Yeah, we're excited. You know what? I was excited for chariot racing to be thrown in the mix. It's like we've seen a lot of gladiators this season. It's time to mix it up a little bit. So yeah, I guess this is
why not?
Yeah, this is a brand new series. We all just recently watched it. So the first question, of course, goes to our guest, Alexandra. Do you dig this series?
I dig 90% of this series.
Okay, that's pretty good for this group right now. Yeah, care to elaborate a little bit on that, and we'll talk about.
Just say be like no, and
that's
then
all
just
you need. 9 out of 10.
No,
yeah, say that. Don't elaborate. Leave. Anyways, you can follow us on most major streaming platforms.
Please like and subscribe. We kept it short this time, you guys.
Even to the point. I think any historian watching this is going to come up with things that niggle them. And I mean, there were times where I was eye-rolling hard, but most of the time I was just, having fun. Mm-hmm. So what else is it supposed to do? It's not a documentary. So yeah. 9 out of 10.
Nice. All right. Colin, what were your thoughts?
If my sort of as exasperated voice at the beginning didn't give it away, I'm really burnt out on dark political intrigue dramas set in antiquity or the Middle Ages that span 8 to 12 episodes. And so I was really dreading getting into this, and I actually basically binged the whole thing today. I mean, I braked for a little bit to have like a 2-hour orientation meeting, but I'm very sort of, I went in with very low expectations, and I won't say that they were necessarily overcome, but my sort of final thought on this is just another one of these. In this post Game of Thrones landscape, these kinds of shows are kind of a dime a dozen. And this one to me didn't really do a whole lot to really stand out amongst the crowd. And so mostly I just found myself meditating on the triangulation of history and media and popular culture that led to this show being this sort of kind of a phrase I've used before on this podcast is doubly derivative, where you can kind of say this is kind of a knockoff of Game of Thrones. It's kind of a knockoff of Gladiator. It's kind of a knockoff of X, Y, and Z, or I, Claudius, and things like that. So I'm fine. Yeah. I'm mixed on it. I don't really, I don't particularly dig it.
Okay.
But,
okay.
Yeah.
I did add in our little text group that hey, at least it sets up the premise for Thermae Romae Novae that Rome is going to be the same for my bathhouses. So
I have a lot of Alexandra mentioned the Nagli questions, and there I found myself I have all these things to ask about is that an anachronistic arch next to the Colosseum? Would they have done this? What about the mechanics of this? There's a lot of little things that I wanted to follow up on, and I bolded, but we can come back to that all in turn.
For sure. All right. Self-proclaimed stick in the mud, Lige. What did you have to say about the series?
I as the stick in the mud, I did not dig this, but I feel like it's not for like a nitpicky historical reason, because I think on like paper, like if I describe this plot, it sounds really interesting, and I think like the storyline was really cool, and the way that they, you know, chose these characters to follow, I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. I think my issue is with like the execution.
Mm-hmm.
I think this show did a whole lot of telling us things and very little like showing us things.
Mhm.
Well, when you go up to someone, you're like, hi, you're this person. This is my whole backstory. And that's how you just
Yeah.
talk to people. That's how people talk to
When
one another
someone
in the
attacks
show.
you, they say, it's me, the person who you left to die years ago. I could not get behind these characters. I wanted so bad to like them and to like feel like I was rooting for them. But I think the two characters that I'm sure we will talk about that I felt like were real characters was Scorpus and Domitian. My favorites, who felt like they were having fun and they had well-rounded characters who made interesting choices. But like even like Tenax and Kala, I was like, I feel like you're all over the place.
Yeah.
And so it was really the characterization that I feel like it didn't like fully execute it for me story-wise. Which I just think it made it like even worse, because I wanted so bad to like this because it had such a cool premise.
Yeah. And I'm glad this series is kind of coming at the end, because there's definitely like moments where I'm making comparisons to Spartacus. There's moments I'm making comparisons to Rome, and like
we could do a whole like map idea board, right? Of just drawing
really
it on a whiteboard
could,
and
yeah.
just draw all the connections that lead to this, you know, all roads lead to this show.
And what I really loved about the show, what I really got into it, was the focus on like the charioteer racing. And I think where its inspiration came from Rome was like, you technically kind of have these nobodies, Titus Pullo and Varenus, getting involved with like randomly young Augustus and stuff. And it's like, and it worked there, but it's like, I almost kind of wish like Tenax didn't all of a sudden become Adal Ludi in this world. I wish it had really just been focused on like the politics of the Circus Maximus and the incoming Colosseum, because like you're showing such a different side of Rome that we don't usually get to see. You can still like, I liked the reference to like, yeah, Vesuvius just erupted and we've got a bad ash cloud for a few days and Pompeii and Herculaneum's gone. But we don't need to go see if Kit Harington's horse is alive or not. It's fine.
I have actually just a general question about that. Like when Vesuvius erupts, like which would have been a thing that would have happened exactly around the Colosseum being built, would they have felt it in Rome?
I don't know. No. I don't think so. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think the ash cloud didn't go that direction. I thought it went...
It did. They did get ashfall. Okay. They did get ashfall in Rome.
It went south.
Yeah. But in the way that like when Mount St. Helens erupted in Oregon, like they found like debris
Washington.
from that.
Don't you dare. St. Helens is in Washington.
Oh, sorry. When Mount St. Helens we'll redo that one. Yeah. When Mount St. Helens in Washington erupted, they found like debris from it in
everywhere.
Like, like Africa, basically. Like it flew all over the world.
So it got some ashfall.
Yeah, but they definitely wouldn't have felt it, right?
Yeah, they wouldn't have felt like an earthquake,
right?
I don't
know, like if like ashfall and like the sky going black seem like different sort of levels, right? Like I feel like so much of Vesuvius went south that even if there was some ashfall, I don't know, it looked really dramatic. And,
I mean, I didn't live through so I grew up in Washington State.
That's why Naples isn't.
Yeah. I didn't grow up in Washington State, but like I don't know in which direction the ash cloud fell, but like it was about 8 years before I was born,
because it
fell everywhere.
Its top off,
it literally blew its top off, and like the soccer fields I went and played soccer in, that's literally where my local town had literally snow shoveled all of the ash into one spot, and they just put soccer fields on it. And when I did my first dig was in Washington, you can still see the layer from 1980. As you dig through it. Like it's just a really thin layer of ash, but it's like, I just hit 1980.
Archaeologists love
in
that
terms of
shit.
like
we do. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I was reminded in terms of like doing their homework, things like the Jus Trium Liberorum gets a
Right?
shout out, which is like,
Yeah.
not that that's like a fairly deep cut for like an NBC daytime drama, or not daytime drama, an NBC streaming drama to drop.
Yeah.
So I forget where the point I was going with that was, but it's an odd balance
of specific and not specific.
I think this was something that we discussed this with Spartacus, didn't we? That they'd clearly done their homework and they were throwing in nuggets to prove that they'd done their homework, but then they just put in something completely apocryphal for no apparent reason,
like
really,
the Arch
to
of
ruin
Constantine.
all of the hard work on the research that they'd done. Well, I was listening to the official production podcast, and it said that because they were using LED screens for the stage instead of green screen, they just purchased a 3D model that had already been made, and the one that was available to them just happened to be Rome at a later point, and they didn't have the time or ability to kind of fix it, so they were stuck with the 3D model that they had, which, I don't know what their budget was. I'm imagining they could have fixed some of the bits and bobs.
I mean, that's
right
like
now.
only
Maybe
people
they
don't
just
care
didn't
about
feel
that
that they
kind of
need to.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't imagine like how much like CGI and computer power went into all of those chariot races. Like I have to imagine that was decently expensive.
A lot.
Because a lot of it looked really good.
A lot of it was this LED screen, which is like new.
Is it the volume? Is it that thing where it's like you stand in like a big room? Like Disney does this for all of their shows now. It's basically like you stand in like a giant kind of cylinder, and the cylinder is like screens in so they can like simulate the environment around you when you're like on various planets and stuff like that. Like they did it for The Mandalorian. That was kind of the first show they started. That was the first big show they started doing it with. Because it's like as opposed to like a green screen.
They said it was 180.
Whereas like with green screen or blue screen, where an actor is just kind of in like. There might be some physical props, but it's, tennis balls on sticks and a bunch of like shapeless, rectangles. When you're in the like that room, there's like some, like they'll have set design, that looks like whatever it is you're supposed to be standing on, but then you can actually see like the screen around you is simulating whatever it is you're seeing. And it's really cool because it's stuff like when the camera moves, the computer's so like the camera moves and then like lighting and direction and shadows and all that kind of stuff changes accordingly.
Yeah.
It does make me think we're going to get more and more impressive sets.
I'm down with that.
For Rome.
I mean, there's any number of like 3D models of Rome out there. I mean, many of them are pretty basic stuff, or like there's that very famous recreation of the city that's in the city of Rome today that has a cameo in Quo Vadis. But anyways, should we do like a plot description?
Yeah.
Like how do you start?
So, and like this is something that like is not really like, you get a sense of like time is going by like fast. Like if you guys watched this and you didn't know how long the reign of Titus actually was, like how much time do you think had passed?
Well, we have a ticking clock in the show, which is the Colosseum, right? Like it's being built, and then at the end of the show, it's built. That's kind of the like framework, and you get the sense that it's mostly done. Yeah. So inside a year, maybe a couple months, something like that.
Yeah, because I would say like maybe 3 years, like somewhere between 3 to 2 years is represented here, right? Because at the very least, the eruption is in 79, which is also the same year that Titus's reign begins, and he only lasts for like 2 years before he dies suddenly. So we get to talk about how creatively they did that this time because
Ramsey Bolton strangles him. Spoilers, everybody. Ramsey Bolton strangles him with a flag.
I was I kind of really liked Ramsey Bolton in this. Like he's like, but this time he likes kids, so we don't hate him quite as much.
I don't think we were supposed to hate him, right? Like he's like the protagonist in this. So like, yeah, I feel like half the plot, our narrative starts with Ramsey Bolton, Tenax, who's like, this kind of
you and Rian,
like come up from the gutter, gonna like Robin Hood all of this money out of these people at the chariot races, and chaos ensues,
but also come up with some really sadistic shows in the Colosseum.
Well, so like the main plot for listeners is kind of a couple of there's a couple of plot lines that converge and diverge at various points, and the main one is with, I mean, it's telling that we keep referring to him as Ramsey Bolton, but starts with Tenax, Ewan Rian. That's how you say his name, right? Ewan Rian.
That's how I would say it.
Sounds good to me.
Cut that out. If I'm saying it wrong, cut it out,
Close
please,
enough.
Christy.
Yeah.
He's Welsh, so. But where he is this, like, he's a fixer, he's a bookie, he owns a gambling house, and then, you know, is this sort of petty crime lord with larger aspirations. Simultaneously, there is Kala and her family, where her children are enslaved and brought from Numidia to Rome, and so she journeys to Rome to try and free them. Simultaneously, there is also the brothers Titus and Domitian, the sons of the Emperor Vespasian, who are at odds with one another for politics. And
The
also,
Spaniard
my favorite, yes, the three Spanish brothers who have come to Rome to sell horses. And those are the three plot lines that kind of converge and diverge at various points throughout the show, involving crime and games, murder, intrigue, all that stuff.
I would throw in there's a few patricians. Selena, whose blue is still, like, her blue shares are stolen from her husband, and she's like kind of a subplot. And then Marsus and his wife, what's her name? Antonia. Yeah.
I have it all written down.
I know. I have all the characters listed too, because it's like there's a lot actually to keep track of. But it seems like mostly Tenax and Kala and her family. You have the brothers from Spain who are bringing their Andalusian horses. Oh, Scorpus. How could we forget Scorpus?
Right.
Scorpus, yeah. I mean, I love that they picked a name and went with it.
Yeah.
You know, we know a name of someone, let's just go for it.
Isn't that how it always goes? And I love that they throw, I was like, I literally picked this name because no one knew how to say my.
I know, he was like, no one knew how to pronounce my name, so I picked this one. It's so good.
And who refers to himself in third person.
Which is excellent
Yes.
and so perfect. But we're also the Judean queen that Titus has
Berenice,
kind of kidnapped-esque. And the, you know, people who are enslaved to build said Colosseum, right?
Which we do have some epigraphical evidence that is the case, that Judeans were like about 80,000 were brought to Rome for building projects. So...
And it's worth mentioning that this is, I think, it's the first time I've seen something in, you know, reception that points that out. As far as the Colosseum goes, most of the documentaries just skate over it completely.
Slavery's not
really
convenient.
cool that they mention, you know, this is how it was paid for. This is, you know, the labour. I thought it was really cool that they bothered to mention that when no one else has ever really made a point about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you go to Rome today, you can, right across from the Colosseum is Titus's Victory Arch, which has depictions of him sacking the temple and bringing all the spoils from the temple back to Rome, which is what Alexandra's, you know, alluding to.
Yeah. And I was talking to the partial historians on X today a little bit about it, of like how interesting Berenice is as a character, because we know so little about her, especially at this period of time. And you know, how do you come up for an explanation of, like, why does she take Titus as a lover? Why does she leave Judea to be in Rome? And they kind of posit this idea of, like, she's doing what she can for her people with what power she can. And it's like, you know, that's smart. I appreciate that. And I have thoughts about her death as well, but I don't know if we want to go there yet. We're always kind of all over the place sometimes.
Yeah, where should we start?
No, well, I feel like I truly think that they tried to do maybe a little bit too much. Maybe there was like slightly too much that was in this season. Like,
kind of like Rome.
I know, like Rome.
Considering it only 2 to 3 years is covered, but that's still a lot.
It is.
But yeah.
There are a lot of subplots that could have been trimmed, I think.
I agree.
Yes.
The guy coming for Tenax because he left him in a burning building, that didn't need to happen. It served no
purpose.
reason.
It was like
no
a 2-episode arc, and then it was over. And that made me so furious.
Yeah.
I hated that.
And
that wasn't a compelling storyline.
And there are parts, you know, there were parts I think where the show was kind of was sort of firing, but there were other parts where I'm not to like cast blame or anything like that, but the show was written by Robert Rodat, who brought us both Save It Private Ryan and 10,000 BC, which is a sort of big gap in, when you talk about movies and quality of movie.
Yeah.
And so there are times where we mentioned like there is very clunky exposition where people come out and just announce who they are and what they're about. In a way, I think of like the Futurama joke where like, you can't just have characters say how they feel. That makes me feel angry. And you have lots of contrivances and weird subplots. And, for as big of a world this is, like, people randomly run into each other and run into things or find super damning life incriminating evidence just lying on the floor. In ways that, there's some rule about screenwriting where like when you have too many of that kind of stuff happening, right, it begins to sort of stretch. And then you get subplots that are maybe a little bit undercooked, like Aura, the sort of forgotten child of Kala's three children.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Or the Vestal Virgin storyline. I'm like, that went nowhere.
Right?
Like, I was waiting for, at some point, the daughter at the very end to, like, at least say Vigo's kid. I'm like, no, why do we have to kill the little boy after watching Vigo
justice
die?
for Vigo and his
100%.
family,
That was
man.
awful. That was terrible.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should start there. Because, like, one of the selling points of this show is the, like, spectacle at all and, like, kind of marveling on, like, Domitian and Tenax kind of cook up these insane spectacles. But I wonder, and I wanted to ask Alexandra about this, is like some of them, like at the very end, when you force two best friends to fight each other by holding their loved ones hostage at knife point, and then you have Emperor Titus in the stands commenting like, this is pretty, right? Like,
yeah.
I feel like even like this is, and I think I wrote him out like, this feels dark even for Rome. But
and I would say, like, especially with Vigo's son, because he's not a slave.
Yes.
He isn't necessarily a Roman citizen, but it's like, for a patriarchal society, it's be like, what did this little kid do? He's not a criminal. His dad's not a criminal. What?
This is one of the things that did frustrate me about it, is that they're clearly making a point that Rome was a brutal place. And it was. No one's arguing with that, let's face it. But then, by trying to make that point, they come up with something so brutal that even Romans would, give them a massive side eye.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell, in the entire history of spectacle, that would have ever happened. It's ridiculous to assume that real Romans would have done it. So in trying to say, Rome was so mean to people, they're actually, out-meaning Rome. Which, says something, doesn't it, about modern spectacle?
Yeah.
We're so hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
They're barbarians. No, we are so much worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that we have so much evidence for those opening games that you could have done any number of the real stories and it would have been incredible. And one of the things that I did think was it needed some levity, and I realised it needed a Titus Pullo.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I was thinking to myself, how could they put in a Pullo? And I realised they should have put in Marshall.
Yes.
Marshall should have been the show's Pullo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Can you imagine him sitting there with his little notepad?
Missed opportunity.
He could have been so sassy. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
that would have been.
I literally wrote in my notes, like, I think a thing that separates out like Game of Thrones when it's operating at its good, when it's at its best, or even shows like Claudius, is they have joy and a sense of fun. And Rome too, HBO's Rome, like had that in spades. Like it had a sense of fun. And a lot of these shows, I think I said this about Domina, which is one of the things that makes these shows such a slog for me, is that they are just so utterly joyless, and self-serious. That is just like everything is, nobody smiles in Rome.
Yeah. The one that came closest was Scorpus. There's a few moments with him and Tenax that like they hit that levity just right. And then spoilers, Scorpus dies, y'all. And it was interesting because I listened to the production podcast as well. And they talked about how there was one character they killed off that they regret doing so. And I'm pretty sure it was Scorpus. Because
it has to be.
I can't think of anyone else that died. Like, Not even Vigo's. Like, I kind of expected Vigo to die in that instance, but
yeah.
Scorpus has that like rock
But I
star
think they kind of
of
had their hands tied.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Scorpus died young, right? I mean, they had no choice. If they're going... Although, I mean, they have so many charioteers that we know. Maybe they could have, I don't know, brought in his long-lost cousin or something.
Well, they faked his death early on, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe they could have faked it again.
Well, that was such a quick, like, you know, I'm used to Spartacus, an entire season titled Vengeance, so it's going to take a while to get your vengeance. So the fact that Elia, the youngest of the 3 Spaniard brothers, like, gets it in one episode, I'm like, no.
I know. It's like, are we not milking this for all it's worth?
We need the other brother in the process who had like,
and now we're down. We had 3 brothers, and now we got 1.
Like, I expected the oldest brother, and Andrea, because he had nothing else going for him but charioteering. Like, that was his shtick, and I'm like, he's gonna die. But like the other brothers, like, you know, he's a little Casanova out there, and he had other things going for him. And then I'm like, and now he's dead too? We waited like 7 episodes to kill anyone we care about, and here we are.
The word that I wrote down for the brothers was cannon fodder.
Pretty much.
I mean, you introduce 3 brothers in a show like this, they're not all walking out alive.
Yeah.
No.
We've just been trained as audiences to sort of expect that.
They had an expiry date as soon as they walked on screen. And it was blindingly obvious.
Yeah.
It was a bit clunky.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Yeah.
So kind of to the point that I think Eli made about, like, you know, the show trying to do too many things, is what do you think the show is about or thinks it's about, right? Like, is it a show about using sports betting to fund political careers? Is it a sport about owning your own sports franchise? Is it a show about cruelty or enslavement or violence or spectacle? Like, I don't know. What do you all think?
I'm not sure it knows.
Yeah. Like, my sense was the idea is like, because there was a lot of discussion of like, why this date, why, you know, this period of time. And it is interesting because we have moved away from the Julio-Claudian dynasty, you know, not long after that. And they
like 10 years,
but the point is like, this is kind of a new Rome within the Roman Empire of like, anyone could be anything. There's a lot of potential in this moment. And like, I like the idea that there's supposedly this is the Pax Romana as well, right? But like, just because there's peace in the empire doesn't mean things are settled by any means. There's a lot of kind of figuring out and repositioning of Roman society happening. And I think the thing Tenax kept saying is like, rise or die. And that kind of seems to be this idea of like, you're waiting to see who's going to rise through their different ploys, through their different careers. And that's kind of how it explores, right? Like,
which kind of though that just feels like a sort of knockoff. You win in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. Like, it's that same sentiment. They just kind of, it's like copy my homework, but don't make it look like you copied me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I it's not a fresh new premise or anything. The setting they put it in was new, at least. So I do appreciate that we're getting some different characters that you don't hear about because they're not Nero. You heard about Nero, but Julius Caesar and all of that. It's like, okay, we're a little bit removed from them finally.
Yeah. I think it's about corruption. That's kind of what I'm landing on. I like Alexandra's point that it doesn't fully know.
Yeah.
Because it's going in so many directions. But in just thinking about it, I feel like it all comes back to like what, hands you can grease. And like, he, buys off the Praetorian Guard essentially. And it's like, it's not really Domitian that stages the coup. It's kind of Tenax, funded.
It was remarkable to me how quickly their coup attempts just devolved into the most like slapdash, half-ass. Where like, we'll just bring him up the stairs and we'll stab him.
Right.
Or like, I'll just bribe the guards right here and now, and we'll just go murder the emperor. Like all that planning.
Go do it like now.
Let's just kill the emperor.
Off stage left. We're good.
So, but I and even like within people that are like supposed to be kind of friends, like Scorpus and Tenax are mad at each other and arguing all the time. Like, I really wanted more like buddy cop, them having fun, to talk to speak to that, joy that we're maybe missing. I wanted to see them actually caring about each other rather than just like yelling at each other for 8 episodes or 7 episodes until he dies. I needed more.
There's only one way to have fun in this show, and that's to go to a brothel. That's their only form of fun. If they're not watching, because we don't really see any characters who are just pure spectators. All of the characters we see have a vested interest, and the only way that they seem to know how to have fun is to get a sex worker. Because I don't think there was there a single episode where there wasn't a massive brothel scene?
Probably not. Maybe the last one.
Yeah, maybe the last one. I just watched it, but yeah.
It was a lot.
It struck me as, again, it doesn't really know what it wants to do, and I think this was, again, something that I said about Spartacus, wasn't it? It kind of wants to be political power plays, but it also wants to be soft porn. I think it didn't need, sex work was a huge thing in Rome. I don't think we needed it forced down our throats, to excuse the pun, quite as much as it was.
That was an interesting thing. Like, it was, when I was making comparisons in my head to Spartacus, it's like the violence and the nakedness, but like nakedness in like different settings. It wasn't necessarily all about sex. And the sex was very much dialed up on Spartacus, but it still made sense in a lot of ways. Like, for instance, it's like, when rape happens, it happened way too much on Spartacus, but like, it was legitimate for who it was happening to and in what ways and for what reasons. Versus this show is like, okay, we're going to hint that sexual assault is a thing, but we're not actually going to go there, which it would have been more realistic violence than the killing of Vigo's son in the arena.
Right.
And it's just like, you don't actually understand the way violence was being used in Roman society to reinforce this idea of law and order in a lot of ways. Law and order between genders, law and order between classes, law and order between Romans and non-Romans. And like, I think that's why it like turned me off, because it wasn't as violent or as sexy or whatever as Spartacus, but it also wasn't as accurate with it a lot of the time too.
Yeah, like the Vigo's son thing is like a really good example of what you're talking about, where it just feels like brutal, like cruelty for cruelty's sake. And that even when, because Domitian very offhandedly is like, I just kill that kid. And like, that is the kind of thing. I feel like if that sort of thing happened in the arena, people would riot. Which, by the way, people on the show riot on a dime, but then they reminded me of like in The Simpsons, where the townsfolk will riot in The Simpsons, then people will be like, "Hey, free hot dogs," and then they'll turn into a party where it's like, the joke is that like the townsfolk of Springfield are like, they're just like kind of dumb, feckless, and like, easily swayed. And I felt like in the first episode when the Romans are rioting over food shortages, and then they're like, a chariot race, better put down my torch and go to the chariot race. That is like, that almost feels insulting.
A little bit.
In some ways they did like present it, like, at least in that first episode, like sometimes that was a form of entertainment, because someone's like, riot over here. And they're like, why? What for? And it's like, who cares? Let's go.
Yeah. Hey, riot!
And you're like, I could definitely see some like young teenage boys being like, who cares? Let's go.
Yeah.
And then being like, oh, there's a race. Never mind. Screw this. Let's go that way. But like teenage boys only. Like no one who's like, no, I'm actually really hungry and need to feed my family. So like, unless there's a lot of food you're handing out over at that race, this not going to distract me.
Yeah. No, I agree for sure on the just sort of depictions of like how violence is used in a more structural setting, especially to enslaved peoples, because I do think that it is really unrealistic that neither of the Kala's daughters, Jula and is it Ara,
I think,
that that never was even like alluded to happening to them. It was like she was like she, you know, hooks up with one of the Spanish brothers, but like,
well, the mechanisms of slavery in the show are also a little loosey goosey, where even just the way they are enslaved, where she murders a soldier and then 2 seconds later a bunch of other soldiers walk in, they're like, what's this? All right, like off you go. And then the brother still like picks a fight with a guard and it's like, you're enslaved now too.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder, I'm like, there would have been more of a like they still had all these cruel institutions, but like they also had laws. Like you can just go around enslaving anyone you wanted at any point. But anyways, but I was going to say to Eli's point about corruption. So like we've been kind of hinting that like, you know, this show very much wears a lot of its influences on its sleeve. You can say like, oh, it's got the Spartacus-esque, you know, graphicness. It's got the HBO Game of Thrones Rome, the politicking and the conniving, the Game of Thrones literally that plays out. But my sort of thought is that the sort of influence that maybe should have been more prominent and maybe could have been the sort of central line to the show is really The Godfather, where we talk about like, you know, this is a show where like there are no good people. Like even our main protagonists, Tenax and Kala, are sort of morally, compromised individuals. They're criminals, right? And really Tenax is, you know, his ascension is directly mirrored by his sort of loss of, you know, his increasing willingness to murder and lie and cheat and steal and corrupt, which is the, you know, and all of this in this sort of Roman dream about upward mobility and escaping the limits and strictures of social class and ethnicity and race and things like this, which is exactly what The Godfather is about, right? The opening speech of the first movie is about, I love America and I came to America to make my dream. And the movie is, you know, watching a man descend into the depths of, you know, the darkness of the human soul to sort of achieve his American dream, which is, I think, there should have been a lot more Godfather and maybe less, I don't know, everything else. But
yeah, because they were definitely trying to emphasize family in a way. Like it was interesting because they were trying to, like, I think they mentioned this in one of the production podcast episodes I listened to. It was like this idea, like there's no lone wolf here. Like there is very much a sense of community, and that doesn't necessarily mean like, you know, everyone's always great to each other, like Lige pointed out with Scorpus and Tenax. But it does show that it's like, you know, Tenax can accomplish this without his community, you know, people who work for him, the children that he helps take care of. Scorpus, who is very successful in his own ways, but would not have been successful without the initial setup with Tenax. So, you know, what I liked that it was showing this idea that, you know, not everyone is trying to take care of themselves, but you also just can't survive in this world without other people helping you out, which I kind of like, but it also just undercut itself so much with that sometimes. I don't know what my point was, but that was something that was getting to me. The family idea. It's like, it's family, but it's not really a good family. I can't really point to a good family. Like Ara all of a sudden deciding she's going to be a gladiator because it's her fault why everyone. And I'm like, your mother is working so hard to free all of you. You were the first one, and you just go turn around and do that.
To do nothing, right?
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
I imagine if there's a season 2, the gimmick is going to be the brother-sister duo. So they're going to like become bigger gladiators. That's my sense for what they're going to try and do there.
I guess. Ugh.
Speaking of clunky exposition, the very kind of final voiceover lines are feel like it's like, is this the setup for season 2? He's like, I'm going to go to Syracuse, see if I have any land that's owed me. And then maybe I'll try to keep a reign on the emperor.
No, I don't know. Hate it.
Doesn't sound like a great pitch.
I like the predictions I have for next season is like Kwame and Jula are going to be like a duo gladiator fight thing. And then because we do have Titus, whose wife was his cousin, as mentioned by Domitian, who is pregnant. As far as I'm aware, it's like, I don't know that Titus ever married or whatever, but there is a well-known story that Domitian killed his cousin wife with a forced abortion. So I see that being a storyline for the next season with her. I don't know what you do with Selena at this point. She's kind of
Domitian reigned for 15 years, so
I know, it's like there's a lot. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's going to be something with the Vestal Virgins because he was also really not into Vestal Virgins. So like that's going to come back with Antonia. We hear so much.
See Alexandra smile.
I know.
Like, oh no.
And then there's so much with Antonia's son who we never actually met, and I'm like, is he going to be a future emperor? Just because I don't know.
I mean, he could do a gladiator too and just go into the arena.
Yeah. It's like, did a consul ever actually get executed?
Yeah, Domitian, he executed about 10. The thing is, we've got two sources for me. I looked this up. We've got Suetonius and we've got, I think it's Dio. In Suetonius, he mentions that Domitian loved to execute on a whim. If someone annoyed him, he would just,
I mean,
he mentions...
what's the point of being emperor if you can't just execute on a whim?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you've got to have perks of the job, right? So he specifically mentions a spectator who made a joke about Domitian really favoured one type of gladiator over another. This guy made a joke about it. So he immediately had him taken from the stands and thrown to the dogs in the arena. And then in the next sentence, he starts talking about senators who were executed, but he never specifies the method. So if he's going to specify the method for a civilian, but not the senators, I think we can assume that they were executed in maybe away from public families.
Off the Tarpeian Rock so that, instead?
Yeah, well, yeah, traditional. I can't think of a single source that would put a senator being executed in public. Because again, I don't think the public would have put up with it. We see time and time again in the sources, the emperors were very careful not to annoy the spectators in the Colosseum, doing something like as egregious as throwing senators to crocodiles and alligators and killing innocent children wouldn't have gone down very well. But yeah, I mean, Domitian, I think the way that they've portrayed him so far, obviously we know he's a psycho.
Yeah.
He's a bug-eyed little freak is what I put down in my notes.
Yeah, why did they have him pulling off the flying wings with his pen? I was really looking forward to that. That's like one of the first things I learned about Domitian, and they didn't put it in.
Because we like to code our evil emperors as like slightly on like somewhere on the spectrum is what we like to do nowadays.
What really annoyed me though was that they coded him being psycho by making him quit and punishing his lover in such a because I think they only had two queer representations. If I'm thinking one of the daughters from Numidia, which was fairly positive, but she seems to have gone out of the gender role by coming out as queer, and then another one by becoming a gladiator.
Right. Yeah,
I'll get into that later. And then the other queer representation is Domitian, and it's a sign. They show his degeneracy through a queer relationship. It's a bit backwards. It's 2024.
Yeah. Well, and Xenon shares the kiss with Scorpus, and then Scorpus kills him afterwards, for his silence, not because
I forgot that one.
Kissed him, but like it still is like not great, y'all. Not great.
No, that's not good. That's not good.
Is there a character who hasn't become a murderer? I mean, they're all
Nika.
Jula.
Directly
and Jula.
They're all. There's not a lot in such a bloated cast. There's still time, seriously.
Oh yeah, it's like I was about to.
There is no ethical consumption under the Principate.
Middle Spaniard brother. He didn't do anything wrong.
That's true. He didn't do anything. He just died. Oh my god!
He was the cinnamon
jump
roll
over that
cannon fodder.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I think there were two things. It was how do we show that he is a wrong 'un? Let's make him queer. And the other thing was, how do we punish the person of colour? Let's make Calla cry and put one of her children in danger every 5 minutes. I'm not sure how many more scenes I could have taken of her maternal anguish. I mean,
over and over and over. Yeah.
But it was quite repetitive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
And it felt like they were both trying to get away with like here's the problem of showing particular slaves in ancient Roman world, and you always make them black. But it's like, but their mom is not a slave, and she's business savvy, and she speaks all these languages, and she's a mother, she's a good mother to her children. But yeah, it's like you're literally just torturing the poor woman over and over and over again.
Yeah, she's an intelligent black woman, so let's make her as miserable as possible and give her no joy at all. She does
at all.
All of that chemistry with Tenax, and she didn't even get some in like the final episode.
Right?
That girl is miserable.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was
Do we even like that ship?
I don't think that needs to happen. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I was like, I like them being
work buddies.
It's a buddy cop. I see them playing off each other.
Yeah.
I wanted them to like have fun together.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can think about them like kissing. But like I feel like we jumped straight from we are like business partners who hate each other to maybe we should make out. And I want some stuff in between.
Yeah. Like, go out for a drink together. God.
It would be nice to have one relationship that's just romantic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. She can't go to any of the fun spots in Rome because her children are being put in danger there. So
every 5 minutes.
Except Ara's getting some for a while there, at least.
Yeah, Ara was fine.
It's fine. Yeah, and it's like, is Ara just reluctant because she doesn't want to go back home, because she wants to learn how to fight, because she is queer? Like, what is her hang up that she's afraid to tell her mom about?
A review I was reading kind of hinted at like that, the Carol's like eagerness to take her children home and Ara wanting to stay is like a sort of unvoiced sort of repression in some ways, where it seems like sort of like in Rome you have at least the sort of leeway to pursue like a queer relationship, or at least the sort of that's sort of implied that like that kind of thing would happen in Rome that maybe wouldn't be viable in provincial Numidia or wherever you go back to. So like in Rome maybe she can find her truest self, but again this is all we don't really know because we don't really see or hear much from Ara for 10 episodes. So if that's the sort of intent, it's subtext.
Yeah, and it's also weird because it's strongly implied that she wasn't a virgin to begin with. So, like, she has experience with men, and it's just like, no, not my cup of tea. Like, you get no sense of any of that.
Yeah, it came out kind of nowhere, didn't it?
Yeah.
Shoehorned in.
On the flip side, what I do like about this Rome is that I thought it was doing a really good job of showing how cosmopolitan it truly was.
That's
like,
true.
Here's some guys just selling some horses from Spain.
Yep.
Here's some people from Numidia. Maybe they're just traders, like bringing in like spice. It's like, hey, I have a better opportunity working here in this gambling den because I speak multiple languages of all the other people who are working here. And here's Scorpus, who is Syrian, but no one can pronounce his name, so now he's Scorpus. And then it's like, I liked that. It was more diverse in a lot of ways that, like, we're getting more and more of in our shows about Rome, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
But it's falling into so many, like, traps and tropes that are like, come on, we can still do better than this, y'all.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that this has come at exactly the same time as the Gladiator 2 trailer is being downvoted into oblivion because of Denzel Washington and some New York accents.
It's
interesting timing.
The timing, I think both this and Gladiator, the productions predate this trend, but they're both sort of very timely in a way, right? As we've talked about the men who think about Rome stereotype. Right, where this show in many ways feels like it is that, like, this is the Rome that men who think about Rome think about. I should have like laid out that sentence and said that like 10 times fast. The Rome your man who thinks about Rome thinks about when he thinks about Rome.
I think Sarah Bond just came out with an article about that in particular. And I remember like the other major critique of the trailer was like, they're using hip hop for like the, it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, that's not Roman. And it's like, and a full string orchestra is like, come on,
and,
people.
Yeah, Hans Zimmer's score is
okay. What?
one of my favorite tropes, a complete sidebar, but in ancient material, is when they actually have people in the show, like diegetic music, people playing like flutes and drums and harps. It sounds horrible. And I'm like, do people actually listen to music like this? Because if that's what music was like, I would have thrown myself off the Tarpeian Rock. Good God, this is insufferable. And maybe, I don't know, modern pop has spoiled me to this, but it's just like, do, 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 do. If I had to at a dinner party and had to listen to that, I would go insane. I mean, maybe that's why everybody was murdering one another.
It's the poor music.
But while we're talking about College Family, I wanted to talk a little bit about Kwame and this. Also, I think like sort of there's like an eco-critical lens that the show kind of gets at a little bit, and then picks up and drops at various points of like this parallel with him and the lion, where Kwame is hunting this lion, and then he brings the lion to Rome, and then at the very end the lion gets out, and it's a very like King Kong kind of moment where like the great beast escapes its chains and goes and slaughters, and then Beauty kills the beast, or in this case Kwame just kills the beast. But and then he goes on multiple times during the show, he goes on like these long rants about the children of Romulus and the wolves, and you know, you can't trust the Romans, and they're these cruel like sons of wolves. Which, first of all, I'm like, wolves don't kill for fun. You're thinking of cats, but
that is true.
Cats kill for fun. I don't know about wolves. But yeah, and then the lion is sort of, I guess, symbolic of Rome's sort of destruction or you know, rape of the natural world or something like that, right? It is very, in a way, like, if you know, King Kong and all the metaphors that it is going to be for like colonialism and imperialism and things like that. The lion felt like a sort of King Kong-esque insert.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed with the way the lion ended up. Just that, like, oh, some idiot like opened the cage, like.
Yeah, the beast trainer. What beast trainer worth his salt just opens the lion cage and walks in?
It had no setup. There was no like build to anything. It was just a random accident, and it didn't.
The only sense I had was like the lion sounded sick in the moment, like it was kind of mewling pathetically, and so I was like, oh, I gotta check to make sure it's still alive. And I'm like, well, that's a really
like,
smart cat
from the other side of the bar. Like, I don't know.
It was against the wall, Lige. It was against the wall, and you can't pull that thing by yourself. I don't know. I'm trying to put logic where there is no logic.
I know.
So.
I'm just like, there's no reason why this lion would have gotten out. I thought that was going to be like a final game, that this was going to be like the final match, that like he killed Vigo, and then and we killed this kid, and then you still have to defeat the lion. I thought they were going to bring that out, and it was still going to be a thing.
My other thought was like, I thought Jula was going to help him more. Too, because like then, and like if you still have spectators there, like, whoa, that was so cool.
Aura was there, and she did
nothing.
Did nothing.
And it's like that would have been the setup for like my idea of like all the spectators are like, oh my god, Kwame has a sister. Look how badass she is. Let's do that again.
Nope. It felt like such wasted space, wasted like emotion. Like, I feel like I'm supposed to be feeling something about this, but I don't know.
I also thought Kwame died too, and I'm like, did you just kill Kwame on top of everything else?
No, I didn't think he died. I
mean, I think the final episode it went off the rails a bit, didn't it? The thing that I thought to myself was
just like that lion.
The Gladiator 2 trailer has sharks, and those about to die was threatening to jump their shark. It was just they'd kind of tied themselves up into so many knots and backed themselves into so many corners that it was a bit of a mess. And I thought, you know, you could have saved some of this for the next series. And I wonder, because the first 9 episodes, I mean, we know that they pack a lot in, and a lot of it could have been cut, perhaps. Mm-hmm. It did kind of feel like maybe they suspected they were never going to get a season 2. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of just let's just go balls to the wall and kind of throw everything in there whilst we still can.
Yeah.
I don't know. The last episode, it was a letdown, I thought.
But they did wrap everything up. Like if it ended here, like technically, like that has kind of like a little bow on it. Like, okay, we have like pulled together most of the threads, I guess.
Yeah, I think they rushed it. I think they should have kept Titus alive and into season 2. And kept that going a bit longer, because I actually really liked their relationship, the kind of chalk and cheese siblings. I think they could have got more out of that. And it's interesting, isn't it, that we've been talking now for an hour and no one's mentioned Anthony Hopkins.
He was in it so little.
He was,
he
was in 99% of the trailer, was just Anthony Hopkins, and then in the actuals, it's been an hour. We've forgot he existed.
I loved his moment of like, I'm gonna play old man, and he's just sitting there on the balcony, just being like, I am checked out, yo. And they're like, perfect,
just like the real Anthony Hopkins.
No, I feel like it worked really well as like, you know, this aging, you know, I don't know. It was,
you know, man who had accomplished so much. And
yeah, but I mean, at the time, it was also like very Biden, right? Of just like this.
Oh God, yeah.
Like, guy who's in power.
It was a real,
like,
it was a real putters and murmurs kind of performance.
And you're just kind of like, ooh, okay, yep, let's go.
Well, I was wondering, I've mentioned this before, but supposedly Anthony Hopkins, when he looks through scripts, he kind of highlights his parts and then he writes next to it, NAR for no acting required. And then if the part meets his quota, he takes it.
Yeah. I also love that they gave him a little narration. I was definitely getting some Ptolemy from Alexander.
Oh yeah, he's been in that putters and murmurs zone for like a good solid 2 decades now at this point.
What else
right?
he gonna
He's
do with that boy? Like, hey, pays the bills.
I mean, I've said this on social media before, that I think that he just does the same thing in everything that he's in, and I always get pushback on it. Yeah, but what about this? And I'm thinking, yeah, that was 30 years ago. If your proof that he's a decent actor is something from, you know,
silence
when I was a small child, he's not a good actor. And I think I thought they could have done more with him. I think you're probably right in that he took it on because he didn't have to do much. I was under the impression that that he died from diarrhea.
Vespasian, not Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
he's so fine.
It doesn't surprise me.
And throwing up mushrooms and all of like, yeah.
And his final comment, his last words were supposed to be, you know, sarcastic because of his horrific manner of death, right? And then in this series, they've just kind of turned it into, no, I must stand. The Roman emperor dies on his feet. You know, most of them don't. Seriously. They really don't.
No, I love when he's just like, take me to the middle of the room. That line actually made me crack up because I was like, did somebody forget stage directions? And Anthony Hopkins is just like, you have to take me to the middle of the room now.
Take me to my mark.
Exactly.
It's like in Arrested Development, or it's like carry me, dragon, like getting carried around. It's like fling me.
I had like one other random thought about like, of all the gladiator stuff, because like what was so cool about Spartacus was like they're using all the language and stuff, and it like it kept bothering me that they kept saying, give him the wooden sword. I'm like, we all watch Spartacus, say it what it is. Not just the wooden sword.
Well, also, is the rudis transferable? Because when Kwame gives the rudis to his sister, I'm like, that's not how that works.
No. I was like, that's not.
It's not a get out of jail free card. It's not like a.
The emperor was there. He's like, I'll let it pass this time. So he got like official emperor override on that.
The emperor has weird. His interactions with the game were very weird. Like not sparing Vigo, which is exactly the kind of move where if the whole crowd is screaming for you to do something, you as the emperor are kind of compelled to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Even Joaquin Phoenix as Commodus. listen to
Yes.
the crowd.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, he did it to like make a point because the game that was actually a metaphor for him in Domitian.
Yeah.
But the crowd doesn't know that.
No.
And then turns right around and is in freeze. It was very like, I don't know, Titus, you're giving me hot and cold here, but like what's going on?
Yeah.
And yeah, very inattentive. Seems like there were several points in the games where maybe he should have intervened and been like, hang on, my brother has gone a bridge too far, feeding senators to crocodiles. But
same with the Vestal Virgin. It's like, girl, you've been set up for this like big moment of like pardon and nothing. Like, I'm just here for the show, y'all.
That's the thing with the exposition. Why it should have been Chekhov's Vestal Virgin. If you're going to mention that she can grant mercy, then you need to show her granting mercy. What's the point? So I don't know. Unless they're doing something in season 2, it just
setting her up for later. Yeah.
Otherwise, it just feels again like we know this fact and we want to show you that we've researched this fact and aren't we clever because we know this. Otherwise, it's pointless.
Money, please. But on the note of season 2, like the thing I thought most about really as I was watching the show was not Rome so much as television and like where this show kind of falls in our modern TV landscape. Because we kind of mentioned parts of it feel like, early 2000s HBO with like the gratuitous sex and violence. Sorry, a lot of it, it's very much like it's mosaic in many ways, right? You can see the gladiator of it all. You can see the Game of Thrones. You can see the Spartacus, the Rome.
Yep.
What else am I forgetting? But like all these kinds of things. And then that just sort of, I think is my final verdict was like, yeah, it just kind of comes up wanting because it feels very kind of derivative and like, there's still space in this landscape, like I mentioned this in this post Game of Thrones world, like there's still space to carve out a slot. Like Shogun, I think did really well in that regard. And that, in many ways that show was following the formula, right? We're going to adapt a book, it's set in a historical period. It's got politics and violence and wheeling and dealing, but that show managed to feel fresh and maybe it was just better written. And in a way that this one feels kind of stale. But
coming from a scholarship point of view, I'm wondering whether it's so clunky because of its source material. Because they've taken it from the Daniel Mannix book, which ain't good.
Which itself is kind of the inspiration for Gladiator. Like if you look up his Wikipedia, that's its like first line is like inspired Gladiator.
Yeah. I think, it's frustrating. Obviously, I'm not assuming that anyone's going to listen to what I say on this. I mean, apart from you guys, thank you very much for asking me. But I think, it's a shame that we've had so many great spectacle scholars in the last 30 years, and we're still seeing TV go back to this throwback that was crap. So I think it is indicative of the kind of gap between scholarship and public outreach and what we're sharing with people. It's a shame.
Yeah. And that's just it kind of like, it does seem like we're never really going to escape the Rome of 1955 or whatever it is, or like a sort of an image of antiquity got lodged into popular media 70 years ago, or, maybe more like 100 years ago or something like that. And has never really been able to dislodge it. And then a lot of the ways in which the show kind of is updating itself or is being a little bit more in line with contemporary sensibilities, like having a more diverse cast, having bigger parts for women, having queer representation. A lot of it feels very sort of like a veneer over it's just a paint job, but I don't know what's the metaphor I want to go with. The statue's still a little wonky.
Yeah.
No, I see that.
I don't know that that's ever going to change though, because like it's always going to come back to like who's telling the story, right? Like it's still like what book got picked to tell this version of Rome, and who was involved in producing it and all of that. It's still limited in a lot of ways. It is getting more diverse, which is helping. It's making like more storylines that never would have been talked about before, like 3 Spanish brothers who breed horses.
Yeah, and like it's not that there's no, I mean, like Rome 20 years ago, HBO's Rome, like did I think a lot of like that updating our imagination of Rome, in that it's like, you know, we're having a dirty graffiti sort of more vibrant kind of urban environment that probably is a little more true to Rome, and and also just a little more interesting.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if this show is necessarily like adding any steps onto that kind of thing.
Yeah, like I said, showing a more cosmopolitan Rome that isn't like everyone just speaking English. And if you had the subtitles on, there was also active choices to not translate every language so that the dominant audience gets to understand every little thing that's being said.
Yeah,
especially Kala's language, right? When she speaks to her children, if you don't know that language, you are not privy to the information. So it's like there are some choices there that are very interesting and very probably more accurate to an ancient Rome than what has been previously depicted.
Sure.
So like it's little steps in some ways that almost go unnoticed.
I still think like it's called Those About to Die.
And
Yeah, we should talk about the title, actually. As an hour and 10 minutes into this.
So this is something that I really wanted to hear, I guess, all of your guys' opinion about, but especially Alexandra. Like, Those About to Die. But I feel like the gladiator part of this was kind of a subplot to the charioteer.
I assumed before I knew anything about this that it was just a show about gladiators.
Same. And I feel it's pulling that audience in who recognize that literally from Gladiator. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for Chariots, we've really only had Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
And
I mean, great chariot work.
Really old. The second one was so yeah, I think it was great that they went so hard on the charioteering because of course the Circus Maximus was the premier entertainment venue and chariots were the premier entertainment. I think what they didn't really show was that gladiation would only be staged a couple of times a year. Chariot racing was several times a week, up to 22 races per day. Each one of them lasting around 10 minutes. So if you're having 22 10-minute races, you could spend the entire day there quite happily. So I think it's absolutely brilliant that they have come out and said, yeah, this was what made Rome tick. Colosseum, great, but this is what was really what everyone cared about. I think they did a good job with kind of tying in about the factions and how political the factions could be.
Yeah.
I would question whether consuls would be part of the investors.
It felt like the factions were kind of a stand-in for like political parties, or like these are the 5 groups of senators that control Rome, and they also correspond to these chariot franchises.
Fair. Trump wanted to buy a football team, couldn't afford one.
So I liked that it did come out really early, straight out of the gates. Again, excuse me. Straight out of the gates and said, this chariot racing is what Rome is all about. That's brilliant, because that is still kind of the myth that most people have, is that the sport of Rome was gladiators. No, of course it wasn't. It's always chariot racing. I think they did that really well. And I think they did a really good job of showing just how dangerous chariot racing was and how fatal it could be. Because we were hearing in all of these sources and the gravestones that we have of these shipwrecks. I think with modern racing, there are obviously a couple of fatalities in F1, that kind of thing. But I think of the 3 brothers, for instance, and only one of them lasts the year. Yeah, absolutely. I can see that happening.
Yeah.
So that was good. The whole Those About to Die, the gladiators at that point, I don't think they did as good a job as, for instance, Star Spartacus, in showing that gladiators were an investment that you would try to not just throw them in on some kind of personal vendetta.
Right.
If you're an emperor and you're worried about someone who's not even been in the Colosseum yet, that's
I'm sorry, Christy, did your cat just like fall off the table?
She flung across it. Yeah.
I just like saw this
And then
thing.
got into it, and it's
Whoosh.
horrible. Chrissy's cat got into the stands and she's just eating spectators. It's rough.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
yeah.
so sorry that like it so distracted
I
me.
saw it on my screen too, and I'm like, whoops. And yeah, she's a bit frisky.
Okay, back to chariot.
da.
Back to chariot racing.
Back to chariot. Yes. Yeah. Oh, and Spartacus. Like, it just felt like Spartacus done light and the only new element that I liked was like when the one guy who has been sent to Flama to die, and it's like, I like how they're just sending one person to die to Flama every time.
All right, I have a thing about Flama, but which
Okay.
is
Well, I was just gonna say how they invest in like their burials, like they have basically a club to make sure that
Which
like,
is
you're not gonna
totally
get fed to the tigers.
legit,
Yeah.
right? That
was about the only legit thing that felt legit for a lot
well,
of
and
it.
even at the very end, Elia is talking about when he's like, "Yeah, I'd like to marry Jula." She's, what about your death? Like, we pay in, and like, we're going to take care of our death, and it's going to be fine. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
chariot pension.
Yeah.
Oh, but on Flama. So I literally wrote down. So if I was in a ludus with a guy who is basically just an executioner, and the whole thing about Flama in this ludus is if you fight Flama, you die, and he'll just kill you. And I also really like the shout out where they're like, Kwame will be fighting Flama. Oh, and also these two other guys are going to go fight Flama too. And I feel bad. Justice for those two guys. But
Yeah.
who get, because like, anyways, if I was in a ludus with this guy whose whole thing was he's just here to kill us one by one in these fights, I think I would get together with maybe some of my gladiator buddies and murder Flama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or, get your mum
like
to
they
do it.
But I would just
Pay off
murder
the guards to like hand off some poisoned wine. Like we know poisoned wine happens in a ludus.
Yeah, Flama's getting shanked in the night.
Yeah.
There's no way like that dude would just be allowed to exist, if he's just this, if you fight him, he kills you situation, which is also, again, we've talked about this. It's been said many, many times, bad for business to have a turnover rate in your ludus like that. But
also it's bad for spectators because there's nothing for them to watch. He executes him in less than 30 seconds and it's over. What's the point?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is what gets me really angry. Is the whole point was that you have them evenly matched so that you don't know who's going to win. It should not be a foregone conclusion in any single match. It really annoys me.
Yeah.
I think
it's like a prize fight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that they did have rankings within each familiar. There was the first palace, second palace. So they were ranked. It would have been more interesting, I think, to show Vigo and Kwame going up the ranks and showing that they were getting Flamma scared and then having Flamma legitimately killed instead of, his mum has slipped him some poison and that's the only way you're going to get past Flamma.
Yeah.
The whole point was that they were supposed to be saying that Kwame is this great warrior.
Yeah.
We'll show him killing him without help from his mum.
Yeah, I agree.
That would have been
I think
so much better.
That they kind of hinted at, which, I mean, again, maybe as we talk about, maybe the show should have just been more about like organized sports and betting and crime. But the thing that they kind of hint at, I like, which is something that feels very real, is the like gamification of it all, like particularly when it gets to betting and particularly the chariot races where like they have stats for charioteers, right? This guy has led so many races. He uses these horses. There's a lot of like data out there that like, gamblers and bookies could be crunching and compiling and did and would about things like, in this lap, he's going to overtake them. He's going to pull ahead in this, he led for this many laps. He has these stats. The
fact that they're checking the horse poop before the race. Like, I've been to horse races before. You literally go and it's like, how's this one looking before I place my bet? Like, and in opposition to that too, where you could bring in like patricians or maybe the emperor or something, is like there's also huge investment in making these as fair as possible in terms of the engineering mechanisms that are created, the continued improvements to the Circus Maximus. Like, as much effort as there is to cheat the system, there's just as much effort to make it as fair as possible. And having those like against each other would have been an amazing approach to the ancient Roman world that has all classes of individuals involved in some level. That didn't have to be Claudius and Rome and Spartacus
There's
all in one.
The tiniest glimmer of that in like episode maybe like 2 or 3 when the horses have been poisoned and they're like coming to inspect them and they hoist
all
them
the
up
horse crimes.
Again,
another horse-based crimes, another
fine.
Godfather illusion.
Yeah.
Yes,
I was like, this is a Spaniard technique.
Like that was fun. That was like almost getting to that like kind of like gleeful I don't know, like behind the scenes.
I found myself Googling remedies for nightshade.
Yeah, right.
Apparently activated charcoal, which I guess the idea is just
but it makes sense.
Poison.
With sulfur or maybe,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Yeah, there's little things. Like most of the gladiator fights were really frustrating, but sometimes I loved that, like the fact that Kwame used his sword to like get his hair out of his face and then keep fighting. I loved that every time he did that. And
I would have invested in a hair tie, but that's just me.
Anyone who has had long hair and done athletic like things, they understand that motion.
I mean, you guys have spoken to me enough now to know that when it comes to a gladiatorial fight on the screen, my standards are pretty low. I'm expecting
not much.
I'm not expecting much
that's
at all.
just it. It's like we're a little bit trapped, I think, by audience expectations and like, you know, the men who think about Rome and like when we want, you know, we have been so conditioned over the last, let's just say 20 years, actually 20. If we just start at Gladiator, we've been so conditioned by popular media to expect a certain level of brutality from on-screen gladiators that it seems impossible to escape. You know, I mean, maybe there is a show to be made about the inner workings of a ludus in a way that's more of a sports drama, you know, and it's about moving up through the ranks, and not every fight has to be a death match. And it's just more actually about the athletics and competitiveness of the whole thing. But I don't know.
People love sports. We're not there yet. Like that would be very compelling.
I know. I'm thinking about, it's like, we just had the Olympics, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is
bring back gladiator fights for the Olympics.
we essentially have fencing, right? Fencing is an Olympic sport.
Wrestling is
LA 2028. They're going to bring back the ludus.
Okay, wait. Something that bothered me when Kala went to poison Flamma, she just like walked in to the ludus,
waltzed in. Yeah,
like the door was open.
Did Flamma just kill that woman? Did he basically like?
No, they both drank the poison. That's what I
took. Okay, that makes more sense.
She
poisoned both glasses, and they both drank the wine.
Okay, that makes more sense. Flamma just saved his for the next morning. It felt like he was doing more of the work. It would have been thirsty, but okay, sure.
I also think he was just like so big that the poison moves slower.
Christy, are you rating his performance?
Well, I was thinking, it's like, man, he needed 2 doses of that stuff to bring him down because, oh, damn, he got muscles.
But it really bothered me how she just waltzed in.
Yeah.
He
was busy, okay?
But like,
she knew exactly
where she was going.
Ludus. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was like,
well, there was a scene earlier and they made a whole deal about how she can't just walk in. She has to like bribe the guard basically. Or
no, she's empathetic to him and speaks his language. His mother.
Fine. Like that works like once. But like
it works once.
Walking directly to the door that you need to get to, and he's conveniently busy, and you conveniently are not noticed when you pour poison in his glasses. That bothered me. And I agree with Alexandra. Like, I think it would have made so much more like emotional, I don't know, value to the audience to have Kwame actually beat Flamma.
Yeah.
And not
that was
poison.
Legitimately.
Yeah. That was the Spartacus thing, right? Like there was the big guy that like no one really survives, and it was Spartacus and Crixus like they hate each other, but they have to band together.
But they have to band together.
And Spartacus did this better, y'all, and that's saying something. If Spartacus did this better,
which is really saying something. If I think that, Jesus Christ, what is the world coming to?
What I would have liked to see, knowing that it was supposed to be the opening of the games, and speaking about how so few characters have like a legitimate kind of win that isn't tarnished by corruption and murder. It would have been so nice if Vigo and Kwame could have filled the Priscus and Varys roles of, okay, they're still compelled to fight, and maybe you can threaten their relatives if you absolutely have to. But it would have been so great to show them evenly matched, so much so that Domitian or Titus says, we can't choose, so both of you. It's a draw. That would have been, I think that would have been wonderful. After seeing both of them suffer so much, would it kill this show to just let someone have a sliver of a happy ending?
Yeah, it might have. I mean, who knows? We have not yet heard of season 2, so maybe it did kill the show.
Victim to tropes, right? The minute we meet Vigo's family, it's just like, oh, I mean, it's again the trope of the war movie where if a guy shows you a picture of his girlfriend, that guy's done for.
Yeah,
he's going
or his wife and kids, or whatever. Or if a detective is 2 days away from retiring, that it's that.
Yeah, like it really felt at the beginning it was set up like them to fight together against Flamma, and it could have at least been like they defeat him, but Vigo dies in the process.
Yeah, that would have felt way more meaningful.
Yeah.
But like Alexandra mentioned, there is an actual recorded instance of 2 gladiators fighting to a draw with such sportsmanship that Titus, or Domitian, one of them, Titus, was moved to grant them freedom on the spot to both of them.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing as always, isn't it? There's no need to make up these dramatic stories when the real one is better.
Yeah.
Just tell the story.
Just tell
because
the story.
it's better than what they came up with.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something too, is like, why do we have to make, like, Rome is cruel, but it's not that cruel. And maybe we have to make it seem so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like cartoonishly.
Yeah, that we can't
cruel.
imagine ourselves in that position.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I think that's what it is.
So do
right?
you think that's why maybe then that this series is so devoid of characters having moments of joy and levity is because they're trying too hard to show that Rome was cruel, that no one could possibly ever smile or laugh genuinely at something that isn't corrupt?
Yeah,
I think it's that like whole weird hypocrisy of Western civilization, right? Like we are of ancient Rome and ancient Greece, but we're also better than it.
Sure.
So how can it be so great that we consider ourselves descendants of it, but at the same time we're still greater in the end?
Well, I think it's also like speaking to how modern audiences look at poverty, right? It's that people who are poor and struggling can't possibly have joy or, find glimmers of hope in their lives. Like they can't possibly, play video games or have a refrigerator with food in it. Like they're poor, they're miserable. They have to be like constantly dying. Yeah. So I think that it's, if we're trying to show this very, very cruel, terrible landscape, that image has no joy in it for the people at the top, right? They assume that the people at the bottom
cannot exist in this universe.
Joy cannot exist.
And I think they've missed a trick there, because they could have made a really good point of the relentless quest for more power and money isn't what makes you happy, and sometimes the poorest monetarily are the richest. They could have made a really important point there, but instead, of course, the poorest have to be made excessively miserable, and if you want to make one of them successful, the only way to do that is to give them a magistracy.
Yeah.
Just, because why not?
Yeah. I know we're getting long on time. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up. And then, if anyone has other thoughts too. But.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I wrote down there actually, maybe we've been wrong. There was, in fact, one joke, but it was maybe, and I almost feel cruel bringing up with Alexandra here because it was very low hanging fruit. But when they have the slave auction, they bring out the slave from Britain and they make a crack about its famous food, which I did that, which I'm like, all right.
Okay. Right. Well, I'm not coming on this show again.
Colin said it.
The show wrote it. I don't know what to
Okay. I am not going to respond to a joke about British cuisine on an American show, okay?
Fair enough.
We don't put sugar in our bread and we don't put cheese in a can.
Touche.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, a lot of the cast are, traditionally British actors have got the kind of antiquity look for Hollywood, right? They've got the interesting faces and the cut glass English accents, which is why I was kind of glad that Ioan Ryan was Tenax, because he was using his Welsh accent, which I thought was a nice touch. Because I think when he was Ramsey Bolton, they made him with the cut glass English accent. So I think it was nice to see more than one British accent being used for ancient Rome, as well as all the other accents, because I think with HBO Rome as well, everyone had the same English accent. It was nice to see.
Yeah,
a bit more
Varys maybe
natural.
had a tinge of Scottish, but
Yeah.
I think that's
with
because
you,
he can
that's
only
a-
do
I
one
mean-
accent.
Yeah. With you, and I mean, I was wondering if this was a case of like, that was because I mean, at least in the United States, like we really only, he's been in other stuff, obviously, but he is so prominently Ramsey Bolton in a way that that's one of those roles that almost becomes like, I wonder if it becomes a bit of an anchor around the actor's neck, where it's like, can't ever, we see him in the trailers and we expect that he's going to be this like psycho depraved sort of like more like Domitian, and he was pretty toned down. He was more. He was, he was cruel and, to a point, but he wasn't Ramsey Bolton. Is what I'm saying.
See, we don't have that over here with him because we see him so much more often. So before Game of Thrones, he was in a series called Misfits, which was a modern kind of You've seen it. So most recently, brilliant film. They did a film about the Welsh people that were the guinea pigs for testing Viagra, and he plays one of the guinea pigs who's desperate to spice up his marriage by. So for us, we've seen him in a myriad of roles.
Sure.
So it's not so unusual for us to see him doing something that's not Ramsey Bolton. But again, it's with all of these big series. I think as soon as you do one big franchise, that's you. So it would be really nice if this became another big franchise so that he could show off what he can do, because we think he's great over here. So it'd be nice if everyone else could see what we see.
And to be fair, like I was thinking of like the Spartacus series. I think we all struggled a lot with season 1 on certain things. And then it seemed like they got more focused in some ways that like, I have hope that maybe the series could do that as well.
Yeah, they've got room to improve, definitely.
Yeah, oh, for sure. The last thing that I wanted to ask about was going back to Berenice one more time. And because historically, Titus dies and we don't actually know what happens to her. So they got to play with that story here in like the final episode. And I kind of wanted to know your guys' thoughts on Berenice's end in this season. Because like, I was like, do I like this? Do I not like this? What do I think about it?
I think it was one too many contrivances for me, or like, there was the fact that she had the like key life-saving bit of information as this sort of not totally independent, but largely independent assassination scheme is also underfoot for her. Yeah, it was, I don't know.
Yeah, I felt like she was just kind of collateral damage, right?
Yeah.
It's like they read the history book and saw, we don't know how she died. We do now. Let's go. And in the stupidest possible way, because I think that her death, it doesn't make it clear enough to me anyway whether she's doing this for her people or because she's got Stockholm syndrome and kind of fallen in love with Titus and it is a genuine love match.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been, again, it would have had more impact if they'd have shown kind of the ambiguity of their relationship a bit more instead of her just, trying to save him because she loves him so much.
Yeah.
Squandered potential.
I think they tried to make some sense, like she knows that Domitian will like in no way do anything for her people, and they show like just how much he supposedly hates the Judeans. So like they do try to offset that a little bit. I think like why I was interested in her death was just kind of the fact that like she's murdered in this hallway in the Colosseum, and she's just kind of left there for a while.
Yeah.
Like no one bothers. It's like there's a dead body in the Colosseum. Maybe we should.
The Queen of Judea was murdered in the if a foreign dignitary was murdered in your amphitheater, I feel like that would be a thing.
You think that it's like I was still waiting for someone to go and like tell Titus, and then when Titus sees her, they just kind of like, well, did you do it? No, well, I've got other things to deal with anyway. So, and I was just kind of like, yeah, it sucks for this TV series, like how she died, but at the same time, it feels really representative of like, how do we think about these powerful women of the past? And like, oh, Titus isn't alive anymore. Who cares what happened to her?
Yeah.
And like, it became like a weird metaphor for like her as a historical figure overall.
Sure. Yeah.
That like wasn't necessarily enjoyable to watch, but it's it was an interesting choice to just, she was kind of forgotten and left to the side.
Because they have the whole
that was my thought.
Roman disdain for foreign queens, right? From Cleopatra onwards. Foreign queen, okay, we don't like her. It did feel really unnatural that if a foreign queen who you disdain is murdered in the amphitheatre, that would have, again, they missed a trick to show some good old Roman misogyny and have a celebration with people saying, yes, the Jewish queen is dead. Brilliant. Wonderful. Yeah. And I'm wondering if they didn't do that because of the fact that she was Jewish.
Yeah. They do that with one of the spectacles with the Domitian has.
Oh, they did her dirty in the.
That felt like it's like nope, that's legit right there. It's like, all right, we're gonna have a total recreation of Judea or of Jerusalem. We're gonna sack it and we're gonna dress up this guy as the queen, and he's gonna get mauled by a lion. It's like that actually feels accurate to what you would probably see.
I think it just felt delayed.
Yeah.
There should have been like an immediacy to what had happened, but they were trying to rush so quickly onto the next bit that by the time they do the spectacle where they're recreating Judea, it feels like a bit disjointed.
Yeah.
I can't even in my mind remember where that happens because it was necessary for a reason, but I forget why. It's like I think it was necessary, or is just Domitian like a chance to show his cruelty towards those people in particular is supposed to force a wedge between Berenice and Titus, but I forget why that was necessary at the time. So, yeah.
Chance for Faramir, Captain of Gondor, to show his quality.
Okay, I've thought of one more joke.
Go for it.
Hit us with it. Is it also mean-spirited?
I don't know.
As long as it's not anti-British, I'm fine.
No,
damn it.
It's Scorpus in the brothel, and there's the scorpion. Like, I got you first. And he snaps it. And like nothing came of that. She was like, "This scorpion will kill you," and then like, "No, it doesn't." I was like delighted that Scorpius was just like, done. Like he's killing like a bug or something, just like just walking.
Well, and there'd been an earlier line of like,
I know
it's really hard to kill a scorpion, and Scorpius is like, "Not for Scorpus."
That's the note that I want to go out on thinking about this show.
They should have done the Ted Lasso and just done the full like Zlatan like thing where he just like is that like the Zlatan parody where he's like I am it's like yes, I am like other men in the same way that a great white shark is like other fish.
Oh my God.
my other favorite Scorpus moment was when Tenax is dealing with Domitian. Is like, "Where's my money?" And then Scorpus is just sort of like, "Hey, yeah, where's the money?" And Tenax is like, "I'm like, dude, not the time." I think they made a mistake killing Scorpus already. They messed up there.
Yep.
But you know what? They're bringing Usher back, so who knows?
There's
Get out.
nothing
Get
is
out.
sacred. Nothing is sacred. We live in a world in which Sporkus dies,
Slams.
but Usher lives.
Shut
What
up.
is this? What is this cruelty?
I don't want to live in this world.
Execute me now.
Stick me on a boat.
So I can
Release the
die.
crocodiles.
Right, I can die with dignity.
You know, we started this off because I watched the series. I think I managed it in 2 days, and I remember thinking that my enjoyment waned more and more as we got to the last episode. And then I haven't watched it for a while. You guys finished watching it yesterday, right? Or today?
Yeah.
I've had a bit of time to kind of forget all the things that annoyed me. And now that we're talking about it, I want to change my 9.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm going to
That's
take it
fair.
down to maybe a 5.
Okay.
I love when I pull everybody down.
It has room to grow. Room to grow. Like, you've got some
Room
stuff.
to
You're
grow,
working with
yeah.
some stuff. Chariot racing, smart choice.
Yeah,
Smart
chariot
choice.
racing.
Go.
Fun.
Yeah. That was really smart.
Chariot racing, brilliant. I was just happy that a gladiator had a shield and used it. I'm easy to please, really. So, yeah, okay. Maybe a 7, just for the shield.
Love
Okay.
it. Love it.
Bonus 2 points.
Bonus points for the shield.
Plus 2 to defense.
Yeah.
It bothers me that that's correct. It is a 2. It is the plus 2.
I knew that Colin would comment.
That is like
Okay, who has any final thoughts as we wrap up Those About to Die?
Bring in Marshall in season 2.
There we go.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
bring in some
Marshall needs to
historians.
be-
How do we know what's happening? Give us a historian.
Yeah.
Claudius had a conversation, or Claudius is like, "Oh, let me talk to
Let me
some
talk to
historians."
Horace for a second, and Livy
Yeah.
has a cameo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Marshall was just so mega sassy. I think it needs some sassy. And
does.
Marshall seems like the natural choice.
Yeah.
Justice for
Perfect.
Marshall. He needs his own show.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks again, Alexandra, for joining us this evening. I know you have an exciting announcement to share with our audience. So can you tell us about it, along with where people can go to learn more about you and your work?
Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, I am a regular contributor for Working Classicists and Bad Ancient. I've just done a heap of work for the Olympics for both, which was pretty cool. And big news. I have signed a contract to write a book about gladiators in the East because they were the fun gladiators.
All right.
So now I actually have to put my money where my mouth is and write a book. So yeah, ask me in a year how that's going. But yeah, it's going to be good because Greek gladiators are fantastic. They are endlessly fascinating, and hopefully I will be able to put it all into a little book for everyone to buy.
Yay!
Cosmicus, please buy it. Please.
Yes.
Yeah, as soon as pre-orders are available, send us the link and we will share it.
Yes. Please.
Oh, thank you.
Finally, special thanks to all you listeners. We cannot produce episodes like this without your support. Please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe if you like what you hear. You can find all our episodes at movieswedig.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to know more about upcoming plans and episode releases and season 5, be sure to follow us on social media where you can find us under the handle of @DigMovies or some variation of Movies We Dig on those platforms. We'll talk to you again soon and hope to have you all join us for season 5. Bye.
Bye.